BookTube. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. And what I'm going to do is just take you through all the... I've been so long since I did a proper wrap-up, so I'll just take you through all the books that I read since I did my last... What am I reading? It was Friday Reads. I haven't decided when I'm going to publish this, but this is everything. And a couple of books aren't even here, so I'll just explain what they are and kind of what I thought about them. So the first one, when I last did a proper wrap up, I started, I don't know how far in I was, to the Books of Jacob by Nobel Prize laureate Olga Tokarczuk. It's a great big book. I read it. I took it with me to synagogue on both days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I did a lot of reading in that time where there's a lot of silent prayer going on. And I did some silent prayer, but basically I did a fair bit of reading. And it's a great, big, chunky book. And I think it might actually be the masterpiece that people think it is. It took me a while to get to it, and people read it. And then I had a copy, which she was here in May. At the International Writers Festival, so I met Olga Tokarczuk. I had bought the book. I hadn't read the Books of Jacob at that point. I'd only read Flights, and she signed my copy of Flights, and she signed my copy of the Books of Jacob, which I would show up and hold up and show you now, but I've already lent it out to somebody who read a recent review of it somewhere and or heard about it, I think.
Toda raba Moti, and it is my great privilege and honor to conduct this conversation this evening with 2018 Literature Nobel Prize laureate, the great author Olga Tokarczuk. Shalom, brucha haba. Shalom, Olga. Shalom.
Thank you for the invitation here. It's really a very special day for me today. I was waiting a long time because we planned this visit here in Israel 2 years ago, and coronavirus stopped everything. But for me, it was occasion to write another book during it. So, in a way, it's good. That
there isn't any bad without good.
It's one of these things, on BookTube, we seem to be ahead of the curve, so that everyone knew about the Books of Jacob when the translation, of course, actually was written almost a decade ago and published in Poland. But we're always ahead of the curve here a little bit, and even though a lot of reviews came out 6, 7, 8 months ago, and I only just read it in sort of September, October. I think other people are also just hearing about this now. Anyway, I lent it to somebody who is not a big reader. I don't think they're going to have a great time with it. He said he's going to be listening to the audiobook at the same time. I don't know. My impression of it was that it is a little Tolstovian. It is a little all human life is here. It was kind of fantastic. I think, and I say this as a sort of Orthodox, on the fringes of Orthodox Judaism, an involved Jew. It's very Jewish, and to the extent that there may be parts of the Books of Jacob which would go over the head of, because it's not just words, although there are words that are used and not translated, not explained, that may not mean anything to someone who's not familiar with Jewish practice, and not the normal things. It's not just mentioning a shofar. People might know what a shofar is. They might know what a Seder night is at Passover. But there are I think more inside baseball Jewish things going on in the book, and a lot of it's. I didn't know any of it. I didn't know anything about the false messiahs. I don't know much about Shabbatai Tzvi, who predates Yaakov Frank, but and I certainly didn't know anything about Yaakov Frank or Jacob Frank or Jacob Frank or however we're supposed to call him. I didn't know anything about Frankism and what happened and what was going on, and so there's a lot of stuff that even for me, someone who's Jewish and involved in Jewish life, I didn't know anything about. But then within the telling, what these characters do and what they get up to, there's a lot of Hebrew, there's a lot of Jewishness, there's a lot of Jewish mysticism, there's a lot of Jewish practice, and also, I don't want to be just painted in that, there's also a lot of Catholicism, and it was considered a big win by the Polish Catholic Church that all these Jews would convert to Catholicism. There's a lot going on. It's 900 pages. They count backwards. It's not a quick read, but it is kind of fantastic. I got a big kick out of it. It's going to stay with me, and I'm going to do more background research on these things. But I think it is the definition of a magnum opus. I don't think it's for everyone. I think it's going to be a tough read. In the same way, I don't think Infinite Jest is for everyone because you have to commit. I don't think I could start Infinite Jest now. I think I read it when I was young. I think it's a young man's book. This, I think, is like War and Peace, and I think there's a lot to chew on. I think it is magnificently constructed and a story told. I think some of it's a little esoteric, but if you can get past that, and if you can get through those parts, which seem to me inside baseball, there's still a lot more there, and a lot more that is current, and the idea of cults and why people follow imperfect leaders. That feels kind of current in so many good and bad ways. Anyway, Books of Jacob. I really loved that. Took me a while to get through it. It was not an easy read. Didn't read it over a weekend, but having read it, I'm happy to have it on the shelf, even though I don't currently have it on the shelf. After that, I read another book, which I've also lent to somebody. It was the third of the 3 Booker shortlisted novels that I read. So in the time that I read it, the Booker Prize was awarded to one of the 3 that I didn't read. But this was Small Things Like These, which a lot of people have read already and loved. Very short time novella, which I eventually picked up. Got lovely hardback, and I was instantly smitten by this tiny book, this perfect Christmas novella, which for somebody who's not big on Christmas, living in a country where Christmas is not a thing at all, it was just a wonderful book. I've learned a little bit about the story of the Magdalen laundries. Is that how you pronounce it? The Magdalen laundries? I'm not sure the correct pronunciation, but if you've seen the movie Philomena with Steve Coogan and Dame Judi Dench, and there have been other stories revisiting this idea of the young women in Ireland who, when pregnant, were abandoned by their families and sent to live with the nuns, and their babies were often taken away and given away, and how they were treated as these cast out women who had been defiled. That's part of the story, but it's a so much more subtle and gentle book, and really it's just about goodness and kindness at Christmas or at any other time of the year. Really special, wonderful, and the easiest, the quickest read, but a read that ends before the ending. And so it's generous towards the reader, but also demanding of the reader. Fill in these blanks, understand what's going on here. I don't need to paint every single story. I don't need to show you every single thing that happens. You know what's going on. You're a human being. Access your feelings. Understand just a great book. I think I've given it to my wife already, and my mother-in-law has it now, and I'd give it to anybody. And I've since understood that a previous novel, Foster, I think that's right, Claire Keegan, is also a very short light work, which is equally exquisite. So that was just a delight. So I end up reading 3 of the book shortlist, despite the fact I published a video saying why I'm not reading the book shortlist. None of the 3 won, but I got a kick out of all 3 of the ones that I read. The only other long list book I have at the moment is the Graham McRae Burnett, which I bought and haven't read yet. So I'll get to that. Okay, those are the first 2 books. Those are the first 2 books that I read, which I haven't got in front of me. After that, I carried on my next in my ongoing, probably 20-30 year project to read Georges Simenon. Maygre, and this is this lovely beaten up old green penguin edition. This is Maygre Stonewalled, which was originally published as Monsieur Gaillet Décédé, and then has been published in English under several. If you're looking to read these and you want to know, and you're worried that you might read the same one, okay, they've been translated a number of times and published by different publishers, or published by Penguin in different editions. So there will be different translations of the same book, and then they sometimes give the book different titles when they translate it. So it's perfectly possible that you would read the same book in a different translation, so you wouldn't even realize necessarily, unless you remember the names of the characters in this specific plot, because it's published under a different title. So I go to Wikipedia, and there is a table under Maygre, where it explains for each title what the original French title was, and the different titles it's been published under in English, just so you know which one you're getting. So my goal is to read them all in order. I think this is number 3. I would love to have them all in these bashed up green penguin. Detective green was for crime, as opposed to the orange ones, which you may be familiar, which were for novels. I would love to have them all on this, but they go for they go for a premium these days on eBay. So each one of these might cost you 5, 6, 7, 8 quid more sometimes if they're in really pristine condition. But I'll look for them and say I'm not in a rush. If I read 1 or 2 of these a year if I'm around for the next 30 years, that would be a good thing. And I just like having them like this, and they're super fun. This was 135, 140 pages. Very, very easy, lovely palette cleanser, and a nice little project. Another project I'm working on is these trade editions of James Robinson's Starman series. Starman is the original Starman was an old Justice Society of America character. Justice Society of America has just sort of resurfaced in the Black Adam movie, which I saw and is not great. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, awesome. Black Adam as a movie, terrible. Well, not terrible, just weak. But this is James Robinson was behind sort of the rebirth of the Justice Society in the 90s and noughties. And then he started working on this series Starman. This Starman is the son of the original Starman. This is Jack Knight, son of Ted Knight, who was the Starman back in whenever the Justice Society, which predates the Justice League of America. Anyway, I like James Robinson. I started reading him when he did a series called Firearm, which for a non-mainstream comic book company, which when I was reading back in the 90s, it was not Malibu, what was the name of that? Whatever it was a breakaway, and it was sort of self-referential and noirish, and I liked it, and so I'm reading these, and they're dark. This is the it's sort of playing with superhero tropes, but kind of spooky and odd, and so there's some classic DC characters, and Solomon Grundy shows up in these, and then the name Starman has been used by different characters over the years, and they show up. You've got the Blue Devil here, and the Crimson Fox. There's Firestorm. So there's a whole bunch of DC related stuff, and I think this is 5th in the collection, and the later ones are hard to get, but I'll try and get the whole series eventually, because if I pick them up every now and then, they're good and they're fun, so I'm happy to read these. Then another series, a lot of series stuff you'll see. Another series, but a new book. This is the 3rd in the Thursday Night Murder Club series by Richard Osman. This is The Bullet That Missed, which I bought. So this is each one. I've got them each in hardback. This goes for £20 new, but I bought this on Amazon for half price. And yeah, I'm sorry for you Amazon haters out there, but there's, I'm somebody who buys 150 odd books a year, and I need to get them as cheaply as possible, and this was the cheapest possible way to get this book. £10 free delivery. No independent bookshop can match that. I'm not trying to put independent bookshops out of business, and I will buy from them when I'm in one. I'll buy a lot of secondhand books, but if I want to read something new when it comes out, for better or for worse, this is the best way I can do that. So the 3rd in the Thursday Night Murder Club series, I think probably the best of the 3 so far. I've enjoyed them all. They're just a joy, each one. I read this when I posted that video of me away at the spa with my wife and my mum, and I read this. They're perfect to read by the pool in the heat. It's hard to imagine there was any about a month ago, but there was, and just properly funny. Richard Osman makes me laugh. He tells good jokes. He uses the same literary tricks over again that he used in each of the first couple ones, which are kind of tired, but I don't mind because it's so much fun. If you've got any love for noir and you have any kind of sense of humor and you like British things, I just think these are as much fun as you can have reading. So that was The Bullet That Missed, 3rd, and I think the best, and I loved the first 2 of the series so far, so I'll be back here for the next one next year in hardback as well. The Bullet That Missed, Richard Osman. Okay, what have we got next? Then we have Boulder by Eva Baltazar, translated by Julia Sanchez. This was written in Spanish originally. Eva Baltazar is a Spanish poet. This may be her 2nd novel. I came to this because of Rebecca Eats Books, her channel, which I highly recommend. She's a terrific talker about books, intelligent, and super fun to watch and see her wrestle with the stuff that she's reading. And she gave this a great review, so I immediately ordered it and had it sent to me. Winner of the win an English Pen Award? Is it English Pen Award given to a book or an author? I'm not sure. Anyway, this is published by And Other Stories, a very short novella. This also read this when I was away at the Spas. This is 105 pages. Let me give you a little pitch for Boulder, which I probably won't do as well as Rebecca did. It is a sexy lesbian tale of love and growing affection. So Eva Baltasar is Spanish. A lot of this is set in Iceland, of all places, and Boulder is the name of a character, and she falls in love with a beautiful blonde woman, and they engage in a long affair and love affair, and to the extent they move together to Iceland, and it all goes swimmingly. It's a sort of sexy, raunchy, thoughtful a novel about the relationship between these maybe seem to be mismatched pair, and the whole thing's 100 pages, but the point in the middle, the point of conflict, comes when a baby is introduced into the thing, or pregnancy and a baby is introduced. So what it starts off as a tale of sapphic love is interrupted and disrupted by the arrival, the birth of a child, and the mothering and the parenting of that child. And I don't want to say any more than that. It's a beautifully told story. It is surprising. It is occasionally grotesque, deeply felt, really magical novella, I guess, 100 pages. I really love this. It absolutely stayed with me. There is an ending, or at least a denouement, which I found surprising, shocking, disturbing, glorious, and really, really worth your time. Boulder, just one of the most fascinating characters in literature that I've read in a long time. And the book is called Boulder by Eva Baltasar. Really, really recommend this. After that, I read another female protagonist, this time written by a man, Modesty Blaze, by Peter O'Donnell. This is an original sort of pan paperback from the 60s, but this is after the movie. So it talks about Monica Vitti, Terence Stamp, and Dirk Bogarde. And there on the back we have some shots of the movie, which was not a huge hit. So just a little bit of a background of Modesty Blaze. Modesty Blaze began life, I believe, as a comic strip. Peter O'Donnell wrote and drew a comic strip about this mysterious sort of Mata Hari-esque, faintly accented female spy. And this is sort of the time after the first Bond films come out. So Ian Fleming is writing Bond in the 50s, and then the breakout Dr. No is 62, and round about that time where everything's spy and gadget and international criminal organizations is in the air. It starts as a comic strip, and then he writes the novel after the comic strip. Modesty Blaze, for those of you, looking for Modesty Blaze trivia, Modesty Blaze is the book that Vincent Vega is reading on the toilet when Butch comes home to pick up the watch that his dad stored all those years in where, and finds John Travolta is caught short on the toilet, and violence ensues. But that's, so Quentin Tarantino was a big fan of Modesty Blaze. I'd never read Modesty Blaze, never read the comic books. It was the comic strip that has been collected several times. And this is the first of then several text novels that were written. This was the book was fairly successful. The movie never really took off. And as is the way sometimes with these things, when the movie isn't successful, so interest wanes in the whole bit of IP. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. First of all, I just liked it as a physical object. Picking up this old, but fairly pristine, even though slightly mouldy, paperback book. This goes on the shelf very nicely. It's originally marked, someone bought this in September 66, and then it was being sold for 70p, and I think I paid a bit more than that. I must have bought this from eBay for a couple of quid. Originally 60 cents or 6 shillings in Australia. I don't know what that would have been. Good stuff. Good proper 60s spy stuff. For those of you who are interested in stuff like that, I think Duncan McCready might have come across this as the kind of thing that he would read. But if you have any love for sort of of its time, classic 60s spy thing, which I do. I've dipped into a couple of things I'd like to read more because I always find them good fun. I'm not sure I'll go on and read. I'll look for the next in the series, the Modesty Blaze, but I guess if I ever came across them in a second-hand bookshop, I might pick them up because this was super fun and a jolly good read, and also perfect for a holiday. I feel like I've missed. Yeah. Also, there's two books that I haven't. The other two books, the two books that I haven't. The other ones I haven't got. I just did in my Victober wrap up. So in amongst this also was The Odd Women by George Gissing, which I just did in my Victober wrap up, which I'm probably going to publish first, and then later on I'll get at the end of this is the I'll do these next two books and then I'll talk about the other one. So after Modesty Blaze, I did another comic book. This is Avengers Standoff. I'd never read a lot of Avengers comics. I must have picked this up cheap. This would have been $35 new, but I would have paid considerably less than that. And this is kind of crap. I think some of this may have been the inspiration for WandaVision. There is a town where no one is themselves, and they're being held there against their will. But in this instance, it's a giant prison, and it's a prison that is being managed by Maria Hill, who is the Kobe Smulders character in the Avengers. And at this point, she's head of S.H.I.E.L.D. because Nick Fury is off wherever, and she's worked out that the way to keep people baddies, super villains in prison is to brainwash them, make them think they're somebody else, and then lock them up in this town. It was kind of fascist and kind of crap. Good fighting action scenes and stuff, but I think WandaVision sort of stole some of this. Maria Hill comes out of this as a really deeply unpleasant character, and somehow gets away with it. And there's also some cosmic stuff in there. I think the most important part of this, there was some point where Captain America had aged out of being Captain America, and then you've got Sam, the Falcon, as we know in the current continuity, he's now taken over as Captain America. And in this story, some cosmic cube thing is Captain America gets de-aged back to a young Steve Rogers. So I think that's the only significant thing that came out of this storyline, was that now Steve Rogers is young enough that he could be Captain America again, but he doesn't become Captain America. He's still, the S.H.I.E.L.D. is with Sam, and I don't remember what happens to Steve Rogers. He goes, I think he's just Steve Rogers, and but with all the vitality of a young Captain America. I don't know. I'm not up on this era of continuity, and this really wasn't very good. Okay. Then I read another great big new frontline bit of fiction, Maggie O'Farrell's The Marriage Portrait. I read Hamlet last year, only when it came out in paperback, so I missed it the first time around. I hadn't read any Maggie O'Farrell before. She kind of fell prey to the fact that I was in school with her husband, and so I don't like I don't often read books by people I'm peripherally connected to, because it just makes me feel sad about the fact that I didn't write a novel. So she kind of suffered that I hadn't read Maggie O'Farrell because I know her husband. I haven't read any of his books either. I don't know her husband. He was in school a few years below me. His big brother, I know a little better. I spoke to him, I interacted with him, was in a school play with him, and then met up with him about 10 years ago in Israel. So I don't know, I'm not connected to these people at all, and yet they suffer from my prejudices. Anyway, read Hamlet, loved it. Hamlet was an absolutely exquisite book, and so I picked up The Marriage Portrait in hardback. I think Bob Booker did a really good review of this, and I urge you to go and watch that and hear him talk about it. I was marginally underwhelmed by this book. I think it's beautifully constructed, but I think nicely written and all. But the plot just I felt like there were some areas there which didn't really come together. There's this whole thing with the tiger, which early on our lead character sees a tiger when she's a young girl and looks the tiger in the eye, Lucrezia. She is later becomes the Duchess of Ferrara, but she is a young, ignored member of an Italian noble family who is married off because it suits her parents to form an alliance with the family of the man she's married to. And it turns out he's a bit of a monster, maybe a bit of an asshole, maybe trying to kill her. That's very early on. She thinks that might be true, and we're told very early on what the fate of Lucrezia was. And I say things kind of like the thing with the tiger is sort of there, but never really comes off. There's some really good stuff about her as an artist and that feeling and her approach and the way she deals with light and perspective and what she's learned, and it's unexpected of her. She's supposed to just be a quiet, supposed to a compliant young wife, and she's very young when she's married, and that's part of the problem I have with it. There's some ickiness here about the fact that she's 14, 15, and so much time is spent about tracing her menstruation and whether she's going to provide a male heir, and just sort of the unpleasant sex that marital sex that she is forced to have as a young teen. I find some of that wasn't titillating. It's not meant to be sort of erotic, but just sort of a bit unpleasant. It's still very much part of it, and it's just sort of okay. I get that that's what was going on, but there's a lot of that in this, and I'm not really sure that's what thing. The idea of the marriage portrait, which is a big thing that I tell you, and why I find that problematic, I guess, is because I don't want to spoil the ending, but anything good that comes to Lucrezia, so she's married off, she's young, and everyone's just waiting for her to get pregnant. That's all she is a vessel for a male heir. But anything good that is potentially available to her is also from another man who is also other men who are attracted to this 15-year-old girl. It's not like that was kind of my issue. It's a little icky, which I didn't love. So this marriage portrait, because the man that she marries wants to have a portrait of her where she is captured, and it's all based on the fact there is one outstanding portrait of this Lucrezia, who's a real life character, and what it captured about her and what we know about her from it. So that's kind of another one of the themes going through, but not really, I think, not really dug out in all its glories. There's the bit me of the tiger and the portrait and her art and the marriage and her mother and father. I felt it didn't all come together. Pleased I read it because I think Maygre Fowler is a great writer. I may not be rushing to buy her next novel in hardback. I think Hamlet remains an absolute transcendent work of fiction. This was okay. Marriage Portrait by Maygre Fowler. Then I read Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, which I've spoken about in my Victober wrap-up, and it took me a long time. It took me 2 or 3 weeks to get through it because there were so many people here and I wasn't doing a lot of reading on the weekends, and but worth every minute I spend with it. After I finished that, I whizzed through this collection. This is Deadpool, the complete collection. My relationship with Deadpool is that I have I think his first couple of appearances. So he first appeared in New Mutants '98, which is right around the time I was collecting comics in the early '90s, and then I got married, and for some reason my wife decided that was not a legitimate way for me to spend my disposable cash on buying tons of comics every week, and so I sort of stopped and drifted away, and then we moved to Israel. So I drifted away from regular comic collecting. So I was there right at the start of Deadpool, and then over a number of years he became the biggest character in comics. So this has happened before, by the way. So this pattern of how sort of anti-heroic comic book characters get picked up because the audience respond to it. I think the first instance of this was Wolverine, and then we have things like the Punisher, who started in Amazing Spider-Man 129. I think it's the first appearance of the Punisher, who's an anti-hero, who's an assassin, and yet somehow he becomes a thing, and then Marvel goes to town and releases 4 billion different versions of Punisher comics. Venom, first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 298, first reveal in Amazing Spider-Man 300, the big anniversary issue, and then goes on to become the most popular character in Marvel and gets his own series and blah blah blah. And he's a baddie, he's a goodie, there's everything Venom all day. And then we have just slightly after that, a little later than that for early appearance of Venom, you have, as I say, Deadpool in New Mutants '98. where his character is not at all like the Deadpool that we know, but he comes back, and then he comes back again, then he gets his own series, and then becomes this sort of fourth wall breaking anti-hero. He teams up with Cable for a whole series, and then this is one of the early standalone comic books publishing that he had. This is volume 2 or 3 of Deadpool, and I thought I'd go back, and then Deadpool later on becomes the cultural phenomenon, maybe a more with wider name recognition than the Punisher or Venom or perhaps not Wolverine, but certainly up there as one of Marvel's most recognizable characters these days. This was great. This was better than it had a right to be. So the first 4 issues are from a Wolverine comic, and they're drawn by the late Steve Dillon, who's an absolutely outstanding artist. Worked a lot on Preacher, if you know that. So his faces all look the same. But other than that, I just find his art so clean, and so I don't want to show you spoilers. One second. This is it's a whole thing is a massive chase. Deadpool, who's been hired somehow to kill Wolverine, and what happens, and you get Wolverine being Wolverine, and you get Deadpool being delusional, having seeing bunnies, and also it's everything that we know about Deadpool now. That's what's going on here. But I'm kind of here for it. It was fun, and the action's great, and the craziness is all there. Then we get the start of this Deadpool series, and again the jokes land. The movie references are broad enough, recognizable, and kind of fun. And there's just some good stuff. It starts with the Skrull invasion, which again is a whole period of Marvel history that I kind of missed, but I did not realize how integral to the whole thing that Deadpool had been. But that story is told here, and the fact that he's been hired by Nick Fury because he's just crazy enough to get the job done, and then what happens to the good, all good. A lot of it, again, this would have been about $35 brand new, and I picked this up much cheaper. But it's a meaty. There's like 14, 16 different comics, 1 to 12. There's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 different comics this would have been. And actually reading so there's a crossover with the team, the Thunderbolts, at the end of this. I think if I'd been buying this Deadpool #1 and bought it every month, it would have been about as much fun as you could have reading monthly comics. So I enjoyed that. And then after I finished that, I started yesterday. I'm 150 pages in to Cormac McCarthy's The Passenger, yeah, it's nice to have a new Cormac McCarthy book to read. I haven't read all his back catalogue. I've read some of it, but I'll talk about it when I finish this. I'll give you my brief history with Cormac McCarthy and give you my thoughts on The Passenger. I know Brian at Bookish already read this and did a review, but I thought I'd give it a go. And that's all. That's 30 minutes. Catch up and everything. You are now fully up to date. God bless you all for staying this long. Take care. Bye.